During the era of the dark days of AIDS and HIV, there was a lot going on other than just the physical issues of the disease, the impact on its partners, its friends, its loved ones, its families. There was so much psychological stress in those days. And our final speaker was one of the first voices and faces that helped to develop, because it was a unique program, counseling for people with HIV and AIDS and with other addictions that were specific to the gay and lesbian community, including sexual addiction, drug and alcohol, many times because of family issues, child abuse, many difficulties that they had. And this person was one of the first that I got to meet that was involved with that. And she worked tirelessly for years and years and years. She is a premium educator and has a deep and amazing understanding of the human psyche, and she can manage the craziest people, including our boss at the time, Mr. Terry Stone, who could be a handful at times, let me tell you. But she did a great job. Please welcome, if you would, our fourth speaker, your president, Evilu Pridgeon.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There was no way I was going to walk up those stairs in front of everybody. So that's why I came out the back way. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I am very honored to be chosen or voted as one of the Grand Marshals. I never thought this would happen. It seems like such a long time ago. Of course, I started when I was 12. So I'm only about 36 now. It's just been a really hard life. I was going to wear my adult female costume, as David Ross called it, Barbara, but I don't have one anymore. I gave that up a long time ago. That consisted of a dress or a suit with a skirt, and as Kathy said, I don't own those. And heels, oh my God. So, anyway, this is it. This is the best you're going to get. So, I grew up, I promise I'm not going to tell my whole, life story because I'm really old and it would take forever and be really boring. So, but I grew up in Austin, Texas. And it was a very cool town. I didn't know it at the time, but, it was kind of a fun place to grow up. It was small. And it was the liberal bubble of Texas, and still is. I didn't know that at the time either. I was a kid, what did I know? But my brother still calls it the hippy-dippy city, although it's not quite what it used to be. After I graduated from high school, finally, I went off to college in the piney woods of East Texas, deep East Texas, at Stephen F. Austin State University. It wasn't exactly the center of activism, but it is where I felt the first stirrings of wanting to change the world. I protested the Vietnam War. Does anyone know were you born when the Vietnam War was going on? Okay. Yeah. And I went to memorial services. Martin Luther King was assassinated while I was in college. And I went to a memorial service. And I don't remember who made up the crowd. I was thinking about that as I was writing this. It was a large crowd. There were a lot of people there, and it wasn't one color. We all just stood together and we mourned a hero. We ended the ceremony by holding hands and singing, "We Shall Overcome," which became, or should become, kind of our motto and our song, our anthem. I also protested, and this goes out for Heather, because I know she thinks I'm totally politically incorrect. But I grew up, I grew up, I mean, when I was in Nacogdoches, and there are these beautiful pine trees, old and big and just beautiful. Well, they were going to cut down this big stand of trees to build a library. Sorry, Lisa Casto. But I didn't think that was a good idea. Even back then, I didn't think it was a good idea. So along with a lot of other people, we stood around and wouldn't let the bulldozers come in and all that stuff. And I was feeling pretty good about that. But then we left for summer vacation, and they bulldozed the trees. The library was beautiful, though, and I guess it really made a difference. But that was the first inkling that maybe I have trouble trusting authority. I'm sure my parents probably had a different story there. So I graduated, and I came to Dallas, and I started teaching at the Dallas Independent School District. I also wanted to be active, and so I campaigned. Does anyone remember George McGovern? Anybody? Anybody? Were you born then? Okay. Yes. He wasn't. Yeah, I would never do that for a Republican. So I remember staying up all night at a call center and taking calls to get donations and calling people and, trying to get out the vote. I was really proud of myself, actually. And remember, I was teaching. And so I went into the faculty lounge the next day. I'd been up all night. I was just really hyped by this. George McGovern, best thing. And I was talking about it. Just, talking about it. So excited. I was in Dallas. I wasn't in Austin. What was I thinking? The room fell silent. No one talked. So I knew then that I was no longer in Austin. I was in Dallas, and it was true culture shock for me. I learned after that to never talk about politics or religion in public. Y'all know I haven't really learned that. But my mama tried to teach me that. I just always have to learn things the hard way. I had never met, I'm probably going to step on some toes, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it anyway. I had never met so many Baptists and Republicans in my life. I was from Austin, for God's sakes. And, a Republican educator is just as oxymoronic, don't you love that word? I love that word. Oxymoronic as a gay Republican or a Republican woman. Just saying. Okay, I won't talk about that again. So anyway, I'm teaching and having a good time, and I remember the superintendent of schools, Dr. Nolan Estes. He was a member of First Baptist Church, Lisa, and he said in 1977 that there were no homosexuals teaching in the Dallas schools. It's just, everybody kind of shaking their head. Even straight people were shaking their heads, going, "Oh my God!" And if there were, they would be fired. So the next day, or shortly thereafter, he kind of had to walk back that statement because he was informed that an estimated 15 to 20% of all DIS teachers were gay, and he figured that probably wasn't a good thing to fire all of us. So I'm teaching, and in 1979, Bill Nelson was teaching the same time he was. He was a teacher at W.T. White High School. And, of course, he's an icon now and such a hero of mine and all of us. He was outed by one of his students who saw him at a gay rally. And the student went to the board anyway, so there he was. I remember what awe I felt for him and just how struck by his courage, his bravery, and his fiery passion. And it terrified me. So I burrowed into that closet. Around the same time, Don Baker, another Dallas school teacher, became a plaintiff in the lawsuit to overturn the Texas sodomy law. I followed the stories of both men very closely as they made history. I marveled at their heroic acts, and I tunneled further back. But I do remember, and you will remember this, and I hope you still do. I still do this. I'm in the mall, or I'm walking in the hallway or store or someplace, and you see someone, and your gaydar goes off. I never said I was politically correct. Okay, so your gaydar goes off, and so you just kind of nod at each other. You know, the nod, and you move on. It was just, just sort of an acceptance and a recognition that, oh, there are other people like me out there, Catholic Jack, okay? So in 1981, I'm reading the paper. I read the newspaper every morning. I was reading the paper. I saw the article, front page of the Metro section. There was a new disease out, or syndrome, and it was identified as GRIDS, Gay-Related Immune Deficiency Syndrome. So called because it appeared to only affect gay men, at least initially. I remember so clearly reading that day, and not being a particularly deep thinker, I still knew that at that moment that this was going to change the course of my life. And it did. And it changed me. So I would like to take a moment here, and I know at least one person is out there, given what's happened this week, and what's her name, Joy Behar? Yeah, whatever. I quit watching The View so many years ago because it just pure arguing makes me crazy. She said something about nurses and that they were just nurses. I want to tell you that, and there were a lot of medical people who jumped in and did what they needed to do when the AIDS crisis hit. I know 3 of them personally. One was Mary Mallory, who was the first medical professional She was the first medical professional who worked at Brian's house, the place founded by Stephanie Held and Lydia Allen. Mary had just as much a part in building that place for children impacted by HIV/AIDS as anyone else. The next person was Penny Pickle Crispin, who's way back there hiding. She wasn't afraid to care for the people in the hospital who were dying of AIDS. Everyone else was terrified of touching them. And this is early on. We didn't really know what was going on. But, I mean, these people were fearless. They just went out there and they did what they needed to do to help people live longer. She gave pentamidine treatments, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sorry, and other experimental drugs just to keep guys alive. And in fact, she started a company called Caroline that did infusions. Sometimes went to the home, sometimes the people came to the building. She tiptoed around. She was a registered nurse, bachelor's degree, registered nurse. And she sort of tiptoed around the edges of her licensing standards in order to make this happen. But she had no fear. It didn't matter. She was going to do this. The other one was Skip Barnes, who worked at Parkland Hospital. He was also a nurse. And he cared for every patient there with respect, dignity, and without any fear. And I just want to acknowledge that the nurses, I love doctors, well, most of them, but the nurses back then were the ones on the front line, and they're the ones who stayed with people and held their hands and knew them. So thank you. So from this point forward, all names have been changed to protect the innocent. And those who probably aren't very innocent, but anyway. Each of these people contributed to who I am and what was accomplished. So Anne, with her friend Betty, started one of the first supper clubs for the AIDS house, as it was known back then. There was a twofold purpose for these suppers. The first, of course, was to provide a home-cooked meal for the guys, and it was mostly guys. The second was to socialize with the guys, because many couldn't or didn't get out much. Being Anne's partner, I got to come along. Wasn't allowed to cook, but I did bring the bread and the paper goods. I suspect that the experience was much more rewarding for us than for the guys at the house. Some of the guys would come and they'd get their food, then they'd go back to their rooms. Others loved the company, and Anne and Betty loved, they could talk to walls, so it was great. I, on the other hand, and like that Facebook post that's going around, I'm the one at the party that's making friends with the dog. That's me. And so I would sometimes go with the guys who were taking their food back to the room to watch TV, and I'd sit and watch with them, just because it was a safer place and it was more comfortable for both of us. And I got to know a lot of guys that way, who became very good friends. Finally, I left the Dallas School District, and I was offered a job at an inpatient treatment program. I wasn't admitted, I was offered a job. It was a perfect fit. Kyle Lynn and I were talking about this earlier. It was like, because people say, so tell me your recovery story. It's like, well, I'm not really in recovery. I don't know how to answer that. Anyway, so it was called Baylor Parkside. And it was a perfect fit. I got to do a lot of the things I'd done in the Dallas School District, only I did it in area school systems, helping faculty and staff identify students that needed help with their alcohol and other drug problems. And that was fun. I also had a lot of free time. So I got to volunteer at Oklahoma Community Services. And that was another thing that Anne helped me get to. It used to be called, it started out the name was First Oaklawn Counseling Center. And there are a few people who were on the board at that time. Lori Masters, we've already talked about Lori Masters, the icon. Everybody knows Lori Masters. She invited me to lunch one day. You should always be suspicious if someone wants to buy you a meal. She asked me to set up an outpatient treatment program at OLCC for the gay community and anyone impacted by HIV/AIDS. I don't ever do much planning, or it's like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So I started doing it, and I jumped in. And it happened because, to paraphrase Margaret Mead, a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens decided to make a difference. I don't know how thoughtful we were, but we were definitely committed. And so thanks to individuals like Pam Newton, Lori Masters, Dr. Doug Norton, and Laurie Sandiford, and many others who volunteered their time, the Oasis program was born. It was the first recovery program for the LGBT community and those impacted by HIV/AIDS to be licensed by the state of Texas and given a grant to operate. It was one of those moments from Field of Dreams, If you build it, they will come. And they did, in droves. I received a Facebook message from a former client of the center, not me. And so she was just saying thank you for helping her out. And this was 30 years ago. She was still clean and sober. She said she gets a laugh every time she tells her sobriety story, because she came into my office, and I was just there to conduct chemical dependency assessments. Not pee in a cup, but, interviews. And she wanted to talk about her real problem, which was her relationship with her girlfriend. And I kept getting her off track. asking her about her alcohol and other drug use. And it annoyed the hell out of her. But I guess she finally had to look at those issues. And we were just at the right time in the right place, practicing what my friend Lisa Osmus calls tire tool therapy. Don't drink, go to meetings, get a sponsor. And 90 meetings in 90 days. Is that right, Lisa? Yeah. Tire tool therapy. So before I was officially hired at OLCS, I was able to hire a full-time licensed professional counselor to work in the OASIS program. Hiring Lisa Osmus was the best professional decision I've ever made in my life. And she is the person, she's the reason I have a job now, actually, too. I don't know where to thank you or, anyway. She's the person, I love my job. She's the person who kept the OASIS program going, as well as the counseling center that Howie Dare and Candy Markham started. And shortly thereafter, I took Jay Johnson to lunch. He was executive director then. Remember about invitations to the meals. And I said, you need to hire me. You need me. And so he did. I'd never done that before. It just was like, this has had to happen. It was kind of a God thing. So I started officially in March of 1989, although I've been volunteering there for a long time. Oh, and I lost my job at the other place, so, which worked out. So as far as parades and marches go, I'm kind of like with Kathy. I miss Paul Lewis. I knew him just so well. He was such a good man. He was concerned about his employees with Cabin because they were watching their customers, their friends, dying and not returning to the bar. And so he and Alan Ross arranged for Cabin employees to come to OLCS for counseling or support groups, and and they helped to fund that. They kept us going for quite a while. But the Cabin employees are kind of like the nurses, because we did that at Caroline also. It's like, I'm too tough. I don't need to talk about this. I'm good. We're all okay. And so, anyway. I remember going to the parade every year and how much work it was. Jeez, it was so damn hot. First there was OLCS, and then there was Razzle Dazzle. I knew Alan Ross personally, and I can only, echo what Kathy said about him. He was just relentless in his pursuit of what he thought was the right thing to do. He was a quiet man and a small man. But I'm telling you what, if he wanted something done, it got done. And now Michael Doman and his team have continued that tradition, and it gets better year after year. And Michael Doman, he is, I know most of you know this, but he has raised more money for this community than almost anyone I know. And I'm just really proud to call him my friend. They're cheering, and they're happy, and they're celebrating. They are wanting to be proud, and they are. It's a life-affirming moment for me. And it's just like the first black tie dinner I attended, the first Life Walk event that was started at OLCS, watching everyone, all races, different colors, walking together, celebrating who they were, celebrating life. And in that time, that's what we did. Because there was so much death around us, we were celebrating life, and we were making a difference. I also went to the People's March held in Austin, Texas. Lisa was there, and along with some other of my exes, I'm sure. It was the Ann Richards inauguration. Yeah, see, remember? And she called it the People's March, and we started across the bridge, and we marched down Congress. I wasn't marching with Ann Richards, but I was there somewhere in the crowd. There were a bunch of us. and to the Capitol, to her inauguration. It was just a really powerful experience, so many different people. Lisa reminded me that as we got closer to the Capitol, there was a group of Christians telling us that we were all going to hell. So we started singing, "Jesus Loves Me." It was an extraordinary time. It was just great. Anyway, and I won't say it was something I'll never forget. I will always remember it. Patty. So I went to I got to go to the March on Washington 3 times with 3 different women, which might explain why I'm single. Anyway, each year the Names Project flag was displayed, and it stretched from the Washington Monument to the reflecting pool. It was one of the most beautiful displays I've ever seen, and it also reminded all of us of the enormity of this tragedy. It was sad, it was overwhelming, but we were there to remind people that we were people and we deserve to be treated as such, like everyone else. So anyway, the second trip, and I can't talk about who I was with there either, the second trip we stayed in Alexandria, Virginia, and it was one of the last stops on the Metro line into D.C. It was perfect. The day was perfect, and so we got on the train to go down to D.C. to the march, and we had, our colors, our rainbow colors, flags, bracelets, dog tags. We did know how to accessorize. And there wasn't a gay man with us. Anyway, I'm sorry. At every stop, more and more people got on the train. And there were those nods again, Hey. But then we all were wearing our colors, so it wasn't really hard to, identify the heterosexual from the homosexual. It was really funny to watch the people who weren't part of the parade and who were, I'm making a big assumption here, I'm assuming they were heterosexual. They'd get on the train, and as we got closer, it just got packed. I mean, it was packed. The train was packed with people, all with their, regalia. And so people would get on, and they weren't really looking around. But then suddenly they began to notice, all these people in their rainbow colors and their flags and, laughing and having a great time. And some of them cheered us on. Others put their faces in their newspapers. We didn't have phones back then. And they never looked up again. Others looked really nervous. I guess they thought we were going to try to recruit them. But they were surrounded by the LGBT community. Every march was different, just as every parade is different. But the same feelings are always stirred within me. Acceptance, inclusivity, diversity, and tolerance. They're all part of the parades and the marches. It was a rough time back then. It was hard for me to write this. I went to more funerals during that period than I've been to in the last 30 years put together. Friendships and relationships were very intense because we never knew when or if we would see each other again. Even now, because of that, when I, leave my family or I'm leaving work or any other place, I make sure to stop and say goodbye to people. It's just kind of who I am and what I do. Unless, of course, I'm trying to sneak out early from work. Jim Parker. Many people have told their story here, and they start with quoting Charles Dickens in A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I totally understand that, and I think many of us in this room do. Yet I'd do it again. Certainly not if it meant such a tragic loss of life. But it brought us together, and we created a village. The African proverb, it takes a village. Well, we were that village, and I was part of that. And I'm very proud of that. Thank you very much.
Miss Evilu Pridgeon.